Looking for NFL football? Stop right here. You found your home for weekly NFL talk and fantasy football. Coming to you live from the BackupPunter.com. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, here's your host, the man who thinks fullbacks win championships, Keegan Matheson.
What's up? Welcome back to the show. This is Keegan Matheson here with you for episode number 17 here. Training camp is open. The NFL season is back. The off-season that never really was an off-season is over. And we can finally get into some real football talk. The pads are on. Fantasy football is just around the corner. And we're going to be going every week from here on out. I know I took another 1 week break. You're going to stop trusting me here if I keep doing this, but I promise you, from now on, we're going to chug right through the season. Each and every week, fantasy football updates, sleepers, advice that will hopefully help you, and we'll get there together. Now, as always, the Backup Punter Podcast is brought to you by DynastySportsEmpire.com and Dynasty Sports Empire Fantasy Sports. So check them out online or on Twitter right now, DSE_football. Get yourself involved in a Dynasty Fantasy Startup Football League. $50 to join, the most fun you can have playing fantasy football. Check them out. Tell them I sent you, and they'll say, you know that guy? You hang out with that guy, but don't worry, they'll still like you. You can also follow me on Twitter at The Backup Punter. Check me out on Facebook under the same name, at the website, thebackupppunter.com. Like I've said the last few weeks, I keep the website pretty quiet over the off-season because it's I don't like to waste your time with lists of breakout players and top 10 this, top 20 I'll let everyone else do that. I like to wait until it's training camp, until you get to see things physically come to life in front of you and really put some eyeballs to it. Because, I make myself look stupid enough as it is. I don't need to make these bold predictions for the sake of making bold predictions for the sake of clicks, really, because it doesn't matter to me. But now that we're into August, I'm really going to start rolling out some good content for you at thebackupppunter.com. And then once September starts up, my favorite part of the season, we are going to have your weekly fantasy sleepers, studs, and duds. Now, I had some luck with it last year, especially some wide receivers that we streamed, tight end streaming, defense streaming, which I'm a big fan of, mainly because I missed out on good defenses last year. But hopefully that'll help you get over the top in some of your weekly matchups in your fantasy league. So follow along there and follow along on Twitter. Now, some news since we last spoke, and it's been a while, and in the modern news cycle, unless you talk about it the day after, it's old news. But Dez and Demarius are newly signed. We knew they would. That's good to see. The DeflateGate report, still nothing. Now, I've said for the last week or two that the most likely time for the NFL, Roger Goodell, to release the DeflateGate report, or reply to the reply to Tom Brady's challenge of the report. Is about a week or two into training camp. Right now, we're a couple days in. I believe the Patriots open up on either Wednesday or Thursday with all their players. It wouldn't surprise me if they dropped it this Friday, maybe on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. But it's not about the stories that are going on at the time. You need to drop a story like this when you know there's going to be a lot more NFL news coming behind it. Well, what's training camp? Training camp is full of fluff, news, and it's an endless cycle. Oh, Martavis Bryant looks like a number one. This guy looks like an RB1. Over and over. 9 hours of live coverage a day on NFL Network, which, don't get me started on how painful that is. If you like watching ex-players struggle to read a teleprompter, good on you. But what I'm saying here is that releasing the DeflateGate report now, it would get buried quickly, because we are back in the NFL season. We're back when things are happening each and every day. And even though they're not trying to bury it, you can't really release something Friday afternoon and have it buried anymore. This isn't the 1950s where all we read is the newspaper. But there's some strategy involved. A lot of interesting rumblings this week about some owners pushing Roger Goodell to, hold the line, not weaken up on the Patriots, on Tom Brady. So this is going to be a real, I hesitate to say a test of Goodell, because what is and what isn't anymore, especially with the ones that he's failed so far. But this is going to be a telling moment, we'll say. Is he willing to reduce this? Wouldn't surprise me if it's reduced to 2 games. I don't see it being anything less than 2 games. But that's enough on DeflateGate, hopefully forever. We're going to move on to our divisional previews, which we've been doing for the past few weeks here. We've covered the AFC Northeast, South, and West, which I believe is all 4 divisions in the AFC. Now we're on to the NFC, and we're going to kick this off with the NFC North. Now for each team, I'm going to give you the players that have come in, the players that have come out, and then some reasons why each team could win and lose this year. I don't care if you are the Packers, Patriots, Seahawks, there's a fatal flaw that could cause your team to tumble this year. At the same time, if you're the Raiders, Jaguars, or even the Redskins, there's some reason, somewhere, that your team could win this year. Even if it's 1 in a million, it's not impossible. It's the beauty of the NFL. And we're going to start off in the NFC North with the Green Bay Packers. My Green Bay Packers, I guess we'll say. Full disclosure, I am a Packers man. I'm a shareholder of the Packers. I cover the Packers for NFLSpinZone.com, where you'll see lots of good content coming up through training camp here. But I like to think that I do it unbiased. So let's look at the Packers. They have added Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins to their secondary this year. Big additions because that makes up for the loss of Tramon Williams and Devon House. Will it make up for it from day one? No, but by week 8 or 10, I think they're going to have the corner pretty well rounded. Tramon Williams going to Cleveland, Devon House going to Jacksonville. Both of them getting a little coin, a little more than they should, but that's the way of the free agent market. Green Bay also lost linebackers A.J. Hawk and Brad Jones. Brad Jones, good riddance, I'll pay your plane ticket. A.J. Hawk, that one stings for me because he didn't really belong on the field last year. He looked small. He almost looked to be sick, to be quite honest. He looked like he'd lost a lot of weight. He was lunging at the feet of tacklers, and it was uncomfortable. He was not the A.J. Hawk that I grew up watching. Since he was drafted by the Packers, I think 2005 it was. 5th overall pick. And unfortunately, that draft slot really left people with some crazy expectations. They wanted Brian Urlacher. They wanted Ray Lewis. They wanted Dick Butkus, which A.J. Hawk was not. But I'll argue all day, 8 days a week, that A.J. Hawk was a great Packer. He was not an elite Packer. He was not a perennial Pro Bowler, but he did his job and he let the rest of the defense operate around him. So that's my A.J. Hawk love. You'll never hear about him again on the podcast, but he's out the door. So that's going to lead to this whole discussion with Clay Matthews inside or outside. They drafted Jake Ryan out of Michigan, very underrated linebacker who I think can start alongside Sam Barrington. But in classic Green Bay style, their biggest free agent signings were their own guys. They don't make big splashes. Charles Woodson years ago, Julius Peppers a year ago. But other than the odd splash, it's all organic growth, draft and develop, sometimes to a fault, but that's the strategy. So they re-signed Randall Cobb, 4 years, $40 million. That deal probably had some GMs in the league saying, what the hell? Because Randall Cobb probably would have got a little more than that from another organization, but stays in Green Bay. Also signed right tackle Brian Balaga, 5 years, $33.75 million. Another good deal. It's a rich deal, but it's not above market value. Now, why are the Packers going to win this year? Well, I'm confident that they'll make the playoffs. And mostly it's about the defense. We know Aaron Rodgers will be Aaron Rodgers, Cobb, Nelson, Devontae Adams, Eddie Lacy. The offense will be fine. Even if it takes a step back, it's not going to be a bottom 10 offense. This is about the defense, and I wrote this up for NFLSpinZone.com. The Packers do not need some great change on defense. They do not need to insert a new defensive coordinator. They don't need a new scheme. They just need to tackle the ball carrier. They were one of the poorest tackling teams I've ever seen in 2014. Really, the only team that would rival them would be the 2013 Green Bay Packers. They were very weak at bringing down the ball carrier, and a lot of this rested on the defensive line. Opposing running backs were always given 3, 4, 5 yards before they first met a defender on the second level. Well, visualize it in your head with me here. Say you've got LeGarrette Blount, Marshawn Lynch coming through the line. As they approach the line, they're a little upright. taking short steps, more agile steps to pick a lane, but by the 3rd, 4th, and 5th yard, they're able to drop a shoulder and go forward. They are in control. And when they meet a tackler then, the running back is in the advantageous position. Rewind in your head a bit. If the Packers are able to get to that running back just 2 or 3 yards in as they approach the line of scrimmage, well, then the tackler is in the advantageous position. And that's not a position that Green Bay's linebackers were in very often last year. So they got eaten up against the run game. That has to change. The secondary as well, but I think Morgan Burnett, Clinton Dix, I think they'll take care of it. Now, why will the Packers lose? Well, if there's an injury to Aaron Rodgers, what is this team? Is it a 8-8 team that can maybe scrape a 9-7 fringe playoff run together? Now, that's a doomsday scenario. What if Eddie Lacy's hurt? He has a history of concussions. He runs with a style that lends itself to concussions, unfortunately. Would James Starks carry the load? I don't think so. And again, with this run defense, is the Packers' sacrifice for run defense going to kill them in playmaking situations? What I mean by that is if the Packers move Clay Matthews back inside, who's going to rush from the edge? Well, Julius Peppers, yes. He's 35, 36 now. Who else do the Packers have to create a consistent edge rush? I don't think they have enough there. So that's going to be an issue for Green Bay. Regardless, I see Green Bay going around 13-3. More likely to go 12-4 than 14-2, that's for sure. Now, I see them winning the division. Will they get the bye out of the NFC? I don't quite think so. I think someone will be up there over them. But I think they're going to make their way to the playoffs quite easily this year. On to the Detroit Lions. Now, they lost a lot of defensive tackles, I guess, is the first place to start. Dominican Sue, Nick Fairley, C.J. Mosley. And that hurts. Their calling card last year, just like when you look at Green Bay, you see Aaron Rodgers. When you look at Detroit, you see Calvin Johnson, yes, but you saw that defensive line. That one that shut down opposing running backs week after week. That's gone. Kind of. They also lost Reggie Bush. He's more of a TMZ subject than a backup punter podcast subject, so whatever. The Lions did add Haloti Ngata from the Baltimore Ravens. Great move. He is not really in the prime of his career, but he's not washed up by any means. Very intelligent player, dominant physical player. He's going to help that defensive line at the very least. Looking to the draft, they added Laken Tomlinson, strong offensive lineman, and Amir Abdullah, running back that I really like. A guy that I think can be dynamic, especially if he learns to hold on to the football. Now, why are they going to win? Well, Detroit needs to get over the top on offense. They averaged, I think, just barely over 20 points per game last year. I don't think that's going to fly in a division with Green Bay, in a division with the Minnesota Vikings. They need to better utilize the weapons they have. Matt Stafford, he's a fine quarterback. Golden Tate, Calvin Johnson, Eric Ebron. Where the hell is Eric Ebron? I know rookie tight ends don't do anything, but he was a high pick. And you know what? I'm a big fan of Matt Stafford. And hear me out on what I'm about to say before you storm the gates, pitchforks in hand. But I think that Matthew Stafford is the closest thing the NFL has right now to Brett Favre. I'm not saying a word about talent, not about skill, not about ability to win, any of that. I'm talking about playing style. Just a tough gamer who goes out, slings the ball from any angle, and isn't hopped up on mechanics dominating their every move. Now, that makes me sound like a bit of a boneheaded old school guy. Don't waste your time with mechanics. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Matthew Stafford is a joy to watch because he'll go out there and sling a sidearm ball 50 yards. Sometimes it's for an interception, but he makes for good TV. So perhaps if I was a Lions fan, I'd dislike it a little more, but just as a man who likes to watch the Lions, it makes for good television. So I appreciate you, Matthew Stafford. Now, why are the Lions going to lose? When I look at this roster as a whole, you look for their one strength, like I said earlier. It's that defensive line. Last year, they stayed in games because of that defensive line. In spite of their offense, they stayed afloat because that defensive line could stop Eddie Lacy, Matt Forte. This year, they would have been able to stop Adrian Peterson, but Dominican Sue is gone. Nick Fairley, gone. And Nick Fairley, when he gave a damn, was a good player. But I don't think that Haloti Ngata is enough, especially in this division, especially when it turns into a cold weather division later in the season, and teams like Green Bay just want to pound the football. I don't think that's enough. I think Detroit is a fine team. They're plenty good. But they're kind of stuck in that place where the San Diego Chargers have been stuck for a while. You know what I mean? Around 8-8, where they won't stray too far from that 500 mark. So that's where I have them this year. Right at 8-8. I'd be happy to see them do better, but I think that's where they end up. One fantasy football note I will touch on with the Lions, question I've gotten a few times. Amir Abdullah or Joique Bell? This is a situation where I think Bell is going to start the year as the starter. Amir Abdullah, this is often the case with these rookie veteran things. The rookie, Amir Abdullah, is more talented, more dynamic, much greater potential, but right now Joique Bell's the known commodity. They trust him. With Amir Abdullah, there are fumbling issues that he has to iron out from college. Pass protection, he needs to prove himself there to keep Matthew Stafford alive. This is a situation in fantasy where, as much as I love Abdullah, I'm going to let this be someone else's problem. Now, if someone else gets lucky and picks Abdullah and he does take over, good on them. But I would rather take a different type of risk. I feel like this is a situation where Joique Bell will start the first 4 games, Amir Abdullah will start the last 4, but those middle 8 are just going to drive you insane. You'll start Abdullah one day and he'll rush for 80 yards, but Joique Bell will rush for 4 yards and 2 touchdowns. That type of thing. Because Joique Bell is going to be the red zone back, the goal line back here. But keep an eye on Abdullah. If you can get really good value, then he's worth a flyer, because he could fill in that Reggie Bush type role in Detroit with Matthew Stafford. Now onto the Chicago Bears. They have lost Brandon Marshall, which isn't talked about enough. This guy gets 1 million targets a year. Jay Cutler loves him. And they gave him away. I'm still not comfortable with them doing that. They've also lost Charles Peanut Tillman, if you like John Gruden, which you should. Lance Briggs, gone. Stephen Pea, I'm going to call him Pea, he's gone. Great defensive tackle, one of the strongest, just in terms of raw strength, one of the strongest defensive linemen in the league. Now, they've added Pernell McPhee on quite the overpay. Wide receiver Eddie Royal, drafted Kevin White, the great receiver out of West Virginia, and then Eddie Goldman in the second round to anchor that 3-4 defense. Eddie Goldman was a great pick for them. That was need meeting value in a very convenient way for the Chicago Bears. Now, Chicago, obviously, they've undergone the coaching changes. John Fox, Adam Gase, and it's another one of these exhausting storylines. Can they fix Jay Cutler? Well, is there really fixing Jay Cutler? I'm honestly of the opinion that Jay Cutler's not as bad as everyone thinks he is. There's teams in this league that would take Jay Cutler. Look at the Browns. Look at the Bills. There are teams with worse situations than Jay Cutler. It's really, at this point, it's time to accept Jay Cutler for what he is and focus on building a team around him. Is he a franchise quarterback worth the money that they paid him? No. That was one of the stupidest contracts I've ever seen. Now, most of it's fake money, thankfully. Chicago protected themselves. If you see a 7-year, $120-some million contract, it really means 1 year with $5, and we'll figure it out later. So Chicago likely won't see that contract play out. But Jay Cutler is what he is. And it's time to put efforts elsewhere, and that's why I do like the Kevin White pick. Despite my feelings about Marshall leaving, Kevin White, great addition. Now, there has been a lot of reports about him playing behind Marquess Wilson and Eddie Royal in training camp. Sends fantasy owners into a frenzy. Oh my God, Kevin White's not going to see the field this year. Yes, he is. You don't draft a guy 7th overall to play him behind a guy like Marquess Wilson, who had every opportunity last year and didn't do anything. Eddie Royal, I like the guy, but he'd be better out of the slot with Kevin White out wide, even if it takes a couple of weeks. Kevin White is going to be a starter there. Alshon Jeffrey is going to get Brandon Marshall's targets. Kevin White is going to get Alshon Jeffrey's targets. Both of them will be watered down just a bit by the presence of Eddie Royal, but I think both of them get a good feed. Now, why can the Bears win? Well, is Matt Forte producing? I'm worried that Matt Forte is going to run into a wall this year. Age, workload, contract situation, none of them look fantastic right now. But if Matt Forte can squeeze one more year out of those legs, this offense can honestly be fine. I like their offensive line well enough. For me, it's about their defense, and that's why I have them losing this year. The Bears' defense, the Bears, like the Steelers, like the Ravens, they're one of these teams, when you think of them, you think, the Chicago Bears, a defensive team. You think of the old Bears teams. That's not who they are right now, and they are transitioning to a 3-4 scheme. A lot of the time, that takes a year or two, not just because of scheme familiarity, but because you need to get the bodies in there. Compare this back to Green Bay when they switched to a 3-4 with B.J. Raji as the nose tackle in 2008. Just like the Bears are doing with Eddie Goldman. You see results immediately, but it does take a couple of years to get the right personnel in. You can't just revamp a defense overnight. So I don't like that Chicago D. I've got them going around 7-9. I'm comfortable at 7-9. I think they might even finish in the bottom of this division. Chicago Bears. Now on to the Minnesota Vikings. They have lost Greg Jennings, which is not an issue at all. Corey Wooten, fullback Jerome Felton. Never like to lose a fullback. Most important position on the football diamond. But they've bulked up all around the roster. Adrian Peterson is back with a new contract because, you know what? Youth of America, youth of Canada. If you are suspended with pay for an entire season for abusing your child, not only will you be welcomed back and paid to sit on your couch for an entire year, you'll be rewarded. You'll get a better contract. Isn't that insane? Is nobody else just... and I know I hammer on these issues perhaps too often lately because they've come up too often. But when I saw that the Vikings did that with Adrian Peterson, I understood the good faith gesture. But why? How has he deserved that? I mean, if you're going to look just on the football field, if you're going to be like that, sure, but come on. Regardless, Adrian Peterson's back. I've got no problem seeing him as the number one fantasy football option this year, if that's what you're into. They've also added Mike Wallace, who is a diva, who thinks that he should see every football on a 50-yard bomb. I don't know how he's going to work in Minnesota. We'll see. Then in the draft, they added cornerback Trey Waynes, one of my favorite prospects, and Eric Kendricks, one of my favorite inside linebacker prospects. Both of those players, obviously Waynes as a corner, but Kendricks as the inside linebacker, great pass coverage. Really going to help that defense, and that's going to open things up for guys like Anthony Barr, Everson Griffin, coming off that edge. That defense is going to be scary, and I'll talk about that in a second. They also added offensive lineman TJ Clemmings out of Pitt. I think that was a third or fourth rounder. Clemmings was supposed to go in the first. Some medical issues came up. Vikings thought it was something he could play through, even if it might not mean the longest career. Another great pick. The Vikings are going in the right direction. So like I said, why will they win? Well, look at what Teddy Bridgewater did last year. It was pretty good. He's a very intelligent quarterback. I love his game. Now give him Adrian Peterson. The Minnesota Vikings are going to run the hell out of Adrian Peterson. And I'm looking forward to that. I want to see how far he can go at age 30. Because being 30 years old for Adrian Peterson is not like being 30 years old for me or you. Adrian Peterson, physically, I'm not talking about off-field, physically speaking, in terms of the body he was born with and has now built, is one of the more gifted athletes on the planet. Really. And 30 for him is like 26 for most running backs. And I'm afraid of that as a Packers man, but we'll see how that goes. But again, why are they going to win? That defense. Anthony Barr, Everson Griffin on D, coming around that edge. Barr could really have a breakout season this year. I know he did great last year. this could really be the year when he gets to the quarterback, because opposing teams are going to have to throw on Minnesota a little more. The Vikings are going to get the odd lead in these games. Now, why will they lose? Is this team 1 year away? Are the Minnesota Vikings ready right now? Now, the offseason causes us to be so anxious to break out this, break out that. It drives me nuts. It's just a way to fill your website with fluff, which is why I don't do it. But everything has to be a breakout prediction. The Vikings are the darling of that this year. What if they're still a year away? What if Teddy Bridgewater needs one more season? Now, for example, if the Vikings are playing the Lions, and the Lions get up 14-0 in the second, do I trust Teddy Bridgewater to throw his way back into the game? Or will the Vikings try to continue pounding Adrian Peterson and sort of dink and dunk with Teddy Bridgewater? Can Bridgewater really chuck his way back? I don't know yet. It wouldn't shock me at all, and I'd love to see it because I'm a big believer in Bridgewater. But it's one of these things where I need to see it first. With Cutler, with Stafford, with Rodgers, all at different levels, but we've seen it. Bridgewater needs to do that. So I've got the Minnesota Vikings. I'll call them a 9-7 team this year. I hope they push for the wild card, and I think they could surprise as the second team in the NFC North. Now moving to the ever-entertaining, shall I say, NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys. Well, they lost to DeMarco Murray. That's the big fish they lost. But they finally got Des Bryant re-signed. Signed Greg Hardy, who... Remember my talk to the youth of America and Canada a moment ago about how if you do bad things, you'll get rewarded? They signed Greg Hardy, who's recently seen his suspension reduced. In the draft, they went out and grabbed cornerback Byron Jones, who I love. He was pretty close to the top of my board. Trey Waynes was at the top. Byron Jones is a very athletic cornerback. That cornerback group needs a lot of help. Great pick. Randy Gregory, they came back and got in the second round. Had the talent to be a top 3, top 5 pick, but off-field concerns. Now, I'm uncomfortable with what people considered off-field concerns. Some people made it sound like he was a murderer, while some people suggested that it was more of just a learning disability that he's dealing with. Something where he might take a little longer to catch on to these things, these schemes. I don't know what the truth is, but I'm rooting for Randy Gregory because it's one of those fallen star stories up ahead of the draft. For months he was going to be second or third pick, and then he plummeted. Jerry Jones is say what you will about Jerry Jones, but he's a guy that I've become strangely comfortable rooting for, because I feel like Jerry Jones is someone who has his players' backs as much as anyone in this league. You see that with Des Bryant. I think you're going to see that with Randy Gregory. They showed that again. La'el Collins, the offensive lineman who could have been a top 10 pick, got him undrafted after that bizarre scenario that played out before the draft. I think this is another scenario where Jerry Jones sold the Dallas Cowboys to La'el Collins. And for all Jerry Jones' shortcomings, there are some areas that he's very good in. One of those is making money. One of those is building ridiculous stadiums. And another is breaking down the wall between owner and player. I think he does that well. I mean, not that I'm rooting for the Cowboys. Don't ever accuse me of that. But you know what I'm saying. So why are the Cowboys going to win this year? Well, obviously, the offensive line helps everyone out, lifts Romo, buys him some time to find a wide receiver not named Des Bryant, maybe. Now, who's the running back in this situation? Now, that's a fantasy question we need to get to here, because it's a hilarious example of how things change without anybody playing a snap of football. When the Cowboys signed Darren McFadden, it was, the immediate news was, wow, he's going to have a chance to start, he's going to step in there. All this talent he's wasted in Oakland, finally, he has a chance behind an elite offensive line. Flash forward to the last month, without anyone really doing anything, without a single player putting on a set of football pads, everyone's saying, no, wait, Joseph Randall. This guy, no, it's Joseph Randall's job. Everyone points to Joseph Randall having a huge yards per carry last year. How much of that was garbage time? How much of that was a draw play on 3rd down and 19? I need to see Joseph Randall do it before he does it. Am I going to draft him as high as most people in fantasy drafts? No. Maybe a couple rounds behind that I'd be happy with it, but I feel like this is a situation where people see one person say, they'll listen to one podcast or they'll read one article saying Joseph Randall's the guy. They see that and they say, well, yes, he is the guy. And then the next person says, Joseph Randall's the guy. And it just goes down into groupthink. Now, I'm not saying that Darren McFadden is really that much at this point of his career. But what I am saying is that we can't just assume anyone is going to step in and rush for 1,500. People talk about this offensive line like, hey, I could step in and rush for 15. No, you couldn't. You'd be on the injured reserve by the end of the first quarter. They need a guy with talent back there. If it is Joseph Randall, fantastic, good for him. And if you draft him ahead of me and beat me, well, I'll be upset, but I just don't know if he's if he's a running back that's going to go at the value I want. It's about value. It's not about loving or hating a guy. I mean, I love Darren McFadden. He's probably going to go a little above the value, just people taking a speculative pick. But regardless, I've got the Cowboys going in around 10-6. I worry that the offense is a little top-heavy with Dez Bryant. That's why I could see them losing. They need some more receivers to emerge there. Maybe Devin Street. Watch out for that guy. But I still see them as a good team that can overcome some holes on defense to go around 10-6. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles did some things and some stuff this year. LaShawn McCoy, gone. Jeremy Maclin, out. Evan Mathis, Trent Cole, see you later. They have added DeMarco Murray, Sam Bradford, Kiko Alonso, Byron Maxwell, Walter Thurmond, drafted wide receiver Nelson Aguilar in the first round. This is a whole new team, it seems, from last year. And to be honest, when you change your quarterback, you're changing half your identity from the word go. Now, where do you start with the Philadelphia Eagles? Why are they going to win? Well, they're going to win if Sam Bradford or Mark Sanchez steps in and plays healthy, competent football. This offensive scheme is one that does not call for Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers. It puts a quarterback in a position where the reads are obvious to him. It's not like a zone read offense, anything like that, not at all. But it's an offense that helps to lessen the decision making by the quarterback himself. How about that for a roundabout way of talking about this offense? It allows for guys like Nick Foles to go out there and look like Aaron Rodgers for a stretch. It allows Mark Sanchez to become fantasy relevant last year. Not as a dominant guy, but he was in the conversation. That's what this offense does. I think Nelson Aguilar is going to step in and be one of the most impactful rookies this year as well. Because even if he's not in my top 5 favorite rookie receivers, he's in my top 1 rookie fits. He fits this offense like a glove. It's a perfect match. And I think he's going to step in and do a lot of the things that Jeremy Maclin did. Now, another reason I see the Eagles winning is Kiko Alonso. I think he is critical to this defense. Absolutely the key. He came over in the trade from Buffalo. Now, what I love about Alonso, if there's one thing I love in the linebacking core, it's a middle linebacker that can cover. And that's what Alonso is. He can create interceptions. He can create impact plays on the line as well. But his ability to snuff out the middle of the field is going to go a long way for this secondary. This secondary allowed more big plays last year than I think any team in football. Well, if Alonso takes care of the middle of the field, that will allow the cornerbacks, the safeties, to play back another yard or two, to relax a bit. They don't have to worry about the heart of the field. Now, Alonso won't do it by himself, but he's a big part. Now, why are the Eagles going to lose? Well, what if Sam Bradford isn't healthy? What if Mark Sanchez plays a little more like Mark Sanchez was expected to play? The whole quarterback conversation is key to this. But my big worry is, has there been too much change? Now, when you look at college systems, the point of a college system is to have a playbook, a scheme in place, so you can take players in and out every year when they come and go from the college, and you don't miss a beat. Now, the downside to that is, when you look at a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, can you take Chip Kelly's system and plug in pro players that quickly? Is there going to be a 4 or 5 week span where all of these players still need to work together to click? Is there too much change? How is this going to come together for week 1? I trust this team to be very good by week 8, week 10, but what about week 1, 2, 3, 4? Now, they could quite easily prove me wrong here, but I'm just saying that's a worry. I'm not expecting them to fall flat, but it's a worry. Now, we look at the New York Giants after I backtrack and tell you that I think the Eagles will go 10-6 and push Dallas in the division. We look at the New York Giants, who lost Antrell Roll, Walter Thurmond out of the secondary. They did lose some depth pieces out of the secondary, but no huge losses in New York, other than the finger of Jason Pierre-Paul. I'm sorry. They added Shane Vereen to the backfield. I love that move. More on that. Dwayne Harris out of Dallas, the wide receiver. They overpaid him, but they got what they wanted. Eric Flowers in the draft, the tackle, who probably should have been La'el Collins, but they had to draft Flowers. They also drafted Landon Collins at the top of the second round, the safety. That will help. Now, the New York Giants, they're, like I discussed with the Lions earlier, like I discussed with the San Diego Chargers, they're a team that is in the middle. They don't suck, but they don't scare me. Why are they going to win? Well, I think the Giants are going to win if Eli Manning can kind of turn into one of those top 15 quarterbacks again. I'm not saying that he's been doing poorly because he's had no help, no offensive line, but all he needs to do is play Eli Manning football, which is unspectacular but efficient. He's going to have Odell Beckham Jr., who, in my opinion, is turning into one of the biggest divas in this league and just rubbing me the wrong way. Every chance he gets, I'll have more on that in a future podcast because we're going to stay positive today. He's also added Shane Vereen, like I mentioned. That's a great move out of the backfield. Eli Manning is going to really enjoy hitting Shane Vereen with dump-off passes, with dirty completions. When that offensive line collapses, which it still will, it's improving, but it's not all the way back, Eli will just flip it out to the side and watch Shane Vereen go. That's going to help diversify this offense. Now, for fantasy football purposes, all you fantasy owners out there approaching your drafts as August nears, well, what's that picture going to look like? There's Rashad Jennings back there, Andre Williams. How's that going to shake out? Just like I talked about with Detroit, this is another scenario that I kind of want to stay away from. If I get great value, I'll say it this way. If I get value that I consider to be good on Rashad Jennings and Andre Williams, I would take good value on Andre Williams over Rashad Jennings. I do like Andre Williams. He had a bad first year. I think both of them are going to lose a lot of time to Shane Vereen on third down, on passing situations, which there will be many of as the Giants are down in games. But I do like Andre Williams. Again, though, this is a situation where I think you're going to have a few running backs with 400 or 500 yards at least, and it's going to be kind of a messy situation. But for real football, which still exists, people, for Eli Manning, that's going to be a good thing. I think that's going to help him. Now, why will they lose? I don't think Victor Cruz is going to return at 100%. That means I don't think he's going to draw coverage away from Odell Beckham. And how is Odell Beckham going to deal with getting number one cornerbacks with a safety over the top on every play? Well, how's he going to deal with failure? My guess is a hissy fit, but we'll see. What's Jason Pierre-Paul going to be after his offseason fireworks accident? Is he going to be on the field week 1? How does losing a finger impact the strength of a defensive end when he's anchoring, when he's trying to push off a blocker? It's not a question I know. It's not one I was expecting to have to know. And then, lastly, this secondary has me a bit nervous with the Giants. I don't think the secondary is where it needs to be. Room to go with that, but overall, the Giants are going in a better direction than they were last year. I still see them around 7-9, maybe dip just a bit below 500. Now, last and least, the Washington Redskins. They've lost Brian Orakpo. No great loss, really. It's signed over at the Tennessee Titans. If he's healthy, he's a loss, but you can't bet on that. Now they added Terrence Knighton, Stephen Peya, and in the first round of the draft, they added Brandon Scherf. A pick that wasn't sexy, but I liked it because I'm a big Alfred Morris fan. You all know that if you've listened to this podcast, I'm a perennial owner of Alfred Morris in fantasy football. And it's not something that I seek out. It just happens that way. You know, you get those guys that they follow you instead of you follow them. Now with the Washington Redskins, my beloved franchise, why are they going to win? Well, it's going to be on Morris. That ground game is going to have to absolutely dominate for the Redskins to even have a chance. And it's unfortunate, but their best chance is really taking their quarterback out of the situation. Removing Robert Griffin III from the equation entirely. That gives them the best chance to win, which, hell of a strategy. Why else will they win? Well, you know what? They've got a good group of weapons down there. Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson. They've got Reed at tight end. You know, these are enough for RG3. Could he ask for more? Yeah, maybe, but that would be a bit greedy. There's a lot of teams in the league that would love this skill position group, especially when you factor in Alfred Morris. Now, one question to look on before we get to why they're going to lose, and it's less of a suggestion, more of why they actually are going to lose this year. But Alfred Morris and Matt Jones, that's been getting some talk. Is Matt Jones going to take over some of Alfred Morris's job? No. Now, if I'm wrong, I'll delete the podcast and deny this, of course, but I really don't buy into that. I think that is the epitome of off-season fluff. Matt Jones was overdrafted in the third round, and he wasn't that good at Florida. He can come in on third down, but that's not anything different. People say Matt Jones is going to take third down snaps. That's going to hurt Alfred Morris's fantasy value. No, it's not. Alfred Morris has never been a third down back. That's what Roy Halou did for very well for so many seasons before going to Oakland, where I think he'll have a nice year. Love Roy Halou. But Alfred Morris is a first down, second down guy. Maybe third down if you're just going to slam it forward. And Morris, he's a Frank Gore type, I guess you'd say. He doesn't leave the hash marks much. He gets 4, 5 yards, rarely gets 0, rarely gets 10. And that's what I love about him. I'm a big Morris fan. And I don't think Matt Jones is a threat. He was not a third-round talent. He was more of a fifth- or sixth-round guy. Didn't dominate at the University of Florida. And I think it's a lot of hype. Don't be caught with your pants down drafting Matt Jones high in your draft. Leave him on waivers. If something does happen, then you can look at him. Now, why are the Redskins going to lose? Well, because they handed their starting job to a very bad starting quarterback without any ounce of competition. I feel bad for Kirk Cousins. Not because I think he's a great quarterback, but because, for the most part, he's played pretty nice over the last few years. He's played nice when he's been forced into relief duty, and he's played nice in the media. If I were Kirk Cousins, if you were Kirk Cousins, wouldn't you almost let something slip that you're frustrated sitting behind Robert Griffin, watching him do what he's done the last couple of years? But for some reason, the Redskins decided to say this year, Robert Griffin III is our quarterback. There will not be a competition in training camp. I don't care if you have Tom Brady. You don't benefit from saying there will be no quarterback competition. Now, I'm not saying that Bill Belichick needs to step up and say, you know what, there might be some competition. Jimmy Garoppolo could win the starting quarterback job. Not what I'm saying. What I mean is, why come out and publicly declare that? They're saying to their fans, they're saying to the rest of the league, you know what, we've got this guy who's really underperformed. Even if he sucks this fall, late this summer, even if he's terrible, he's still going to be the quarterback. We're not going to change our minds. There's not a competition. Is the best player going to play? No. Robert Griffin's going to play, regardless of whether he's the best. Now, if he doesn't complete a pass in training camp, I'm sure that changes, but why? I don't get that, and I don't believe in Robert Griffin, the player. I'm not particularly fond of Robert Griffin, the fake smiling media man, either. I see the Redskins going, 3-13, 4-12, in around there, dead last in the division, picking pretty high next year. And it's and now keep in mind, my distaste here is just geared towards Robert Griffin and that coaching staff. A lot of players on this team that I really do like. Terrence Knighton, I almost feel bad for the guy. Gotta love pot roast. And again, Alfred Morris. But man, I don't see this team going in the right direction right now. So that wraps up the NFC North and the NFC East previews for the season. Now, as I said at the top of the show, training camps have opened. By the time we speak next week, which will come on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll tweet it out from @TheBackupPunter on Twitter. By the time we speak next, everyone will be full go. Now, this first week or so, you can start to get a sense, more of a depth chart. Don't look for... The reports that kill me are, Eddie Lacy looks fast. Cecil Shorts is looking really fast out there. Nate Washington is in the best shape of his life. Everyone's fast and everyone's in good shape, whatever. What you look for this first week is the depth chart. Who is running with the ones? Who is with the twos? What is out of place? What doesn't look right? And then you unpack that. And I'll have more of that over the next few weeks leading up to kickoff in September. And then, as I said, you can visit thebackupunter.com, where I will post this podcast. I post all of the YouTube links. And by the way, check it out on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube if you're one of those people who isn't into the podcasts on your phone, tablet, or laptop. But check it out on YouTube, and I will have some fantasy football articles, which are words typed into paragraphs and posted on web pages for you throughout the month of August. I'll get a little more comfortable with putting my rankings together once I see what's happening. Probably in around August 15th, I'll give you some real rankings. Hopefully just before your fantasy football draft, as close as I can get for that. So until then, subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on Stitcher or your favorite podcatcher. Check me out at thebackupunter.com, @thebackupunter on Twitter, The Backup Punter on Facebook. Like it, follow along, and continue listening. I really appreciate that you took the time today and every week to listen to the Backup Punter podcast. I know that it's not an accident. I know your finger didn't slip and make you listen to 45 minutes of this show. So I do appreciate the decision. And as always, my name is Keegan Matheson, hoping that all of your punts in life stop on the 1-yard line. Let's talk next week.